Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Delta 8, which is one of the two P-tier events that is taking place this weekend in Japan. And this is only a one-day event, so you got a lot of Smash compacted into one day. And our top 16 seeds are going to be Gluttony, Snow, Zachary, and Meister in 13th, Rare-kun, MKLeo, T, and Osimo in 9th. And 7th, you're going to have Ken and Yaura. 5th is Zomba Shutone. 4th is Mia. 3rd is Hurt. 2nd is Spargo. And projected to win the entire thing is Akola. And then I use this graphic right here just because the top 16 was split up into two and it looked awkward. So be sure to follow Darknut Stat on Twitter because they do really good work and this just looks cool. Let's get right into it. So let's get right into it. Our first matchup is going to be Akola versus MK Big Boss. And I do think that Rob does pretty well into Steve. I could see that being a matchup where Rob is winning, but it's at least even. With that in mind, though, it is still Akola. He has yet to lose a set at a tournament this year, at least a tournament that has counted this year, so I would definitely expect him to win this one. Then you're going to have either Gluttony or Gak facing Akola, and I would actually expect Gak to take the upset here. He's been really good versus Gluttony historically, and I think Ness does decent into Wario. Usually the Ness showings aren't that big of a deal, but versus Wario, who's hitting with his face, they definitely make a difference, and I think Gak's going to be able to take that one. So then you're going to have Akola versus Gak, and Ness Steve is a really bad matchup for Ness, so I think Akola is definitely going to win there. And then on the other side, to face him to get into the top 8, you're going to have one of these four players, likely. The first one is going to be between Ken and Karage, and I would just expect Ken to take it. Sonic is a very good character, and we haven't seen a ton from Ken recently, but he is still one of the best players in the entire world. You do got to give Karage some credit, though, because he has definitely been on an uptick. I could see him making the upset, but I'm just going to go with Ken here. Then you're going to have Osimo versus Carmelo, and Osimo is really good at the Steve matchup. I'm not super sure how Ryu does into it. You have a couple ways to break the blocks, but I would definitely say if I had to favor one character, it would be Steve. But even with it, Osimo, very good at the matchup. He's taken a set off of Akola before, and even though it was only one set, the fact that he was able to do it at all is really promising for me. And then the next one is going to be Ken versus Osimo, and I would expect Ken to win this one. I do think that Sonic is favored in that matchup, and overall it is 4-2 in Ken's favor, but it should be noted that Osimo did win their last encounter, and it was 4 months ago, so that is a little bit of time, but Osimo definitely has a fighting chance, though I would expect Ken to win it. And then finally, to get into the top 8, you're going to have Akola and Ken, the two projected seeds, and I do think Akola is going to win this one. Kind of like I said earlier with MK Big Boss, you would on paper favor Ken in this matchup just because Sonic is Steve's worst matchup, at least in my opinion. It is very difficult for him to have success there, but we also know that Akola has an Aegis, and even without the Aegis, this guy is just kind of different. He's in contention for the best player in the world. He's honestly a huge question mark coming into this event, but from what I've seen from him in 2024, he should be getting into the top 8. Next up is gonna be Mia, and his first opponent is going to be up versus Tsubaki, and this is a really interesting one because Tsubaki is one of the only players in the entire world who has a winning record on Mia. It's going to be 2-1 in his favor, and you do have Mia winning that last encounter, and I also think that Mia is going to win this encounter. But there's definitely a chance that Tsubaki can take the upset. When this player is on form, he is exceptional. He has the best gun usage out of any Joker player in the entire world, and that is the most important part of the character, so he's definitely got a shot. Then you're going to have the other best Game Watch player in the world in Meister going up against Tama P, but unfortunately for Meister, I do think that Tama P is going to take this one. I think Bayonetta does pretty well into Game Watch, to be honest. She's got a lot of really good ways to evade Game Watch and neutral. The disadvantage isn't that big of a problem because of how good Bayonetta is in the air, and you kill the character super early, so you don't have to worry about those stocks getting kind of musty. Now, Meister, very good player, definitely has a chance versus Tama P. He's been able to take sets off players like Lima in the past, but I am going to be going with Tama P to win this one. And then you're going to have Mia versus Tama P, and I'm going to go with Tama P once again. I think this guy is going to have a run at this event. And also, it would be kind of weird of me to predict him to beat the one Game Watch, but not the other Game Watch, even though, and it's important to establish this, Mia is definitely the better Game Watch player. I just think he's a better player in general. He's just really good at this game, in contention for best in the world. But I think Tama P is going to pop off. Also, I want to add that Mia and Tama P have played 3 times. One of them has gone into Tama P's favor, and 2 of them have gone into Mia's favor. And I don't think that Game & Watch gets destroyed by Bayonetta. I would say that matchup is either even or slightly in Bayo's favor, so I'm not saying this is an easy win for Tama P. I just think he's really good and can pull it off. Next up is going to be Zomba versus Taikei, and I would definitely expect Zomba to take this one, considering that he beat Sonics in their last encounter, and also Rob does pretty well into Sonic. You have ways to disrupt him in the neutral with Gyro and Laser. The offstage gameplay isn't as bad as it is for most characters because Rob has an amazing recovery and is one of the few characters that can edgeguard Sonic, though you probably won't be seeing it too much. You have Nair, which is a really strong tool in neutral. Now, with all that in mind, the matchup is definitely still even, but I think an even matchup is definitely going to favor Zomba there. Then you're going to have Reru versus Matsunabe, and I would expect Reru to win this one. The Spaceys just do not have a lot of fun versus Luigi. If I had to like graph it, it would be like, Fox, that's a nightmare. Then you're going to have Falco, not as bad, that's more of like a wet dream, and then Wolf is like getting only 6 or 5 hours of sleep, so not miserable, but not ideal. And since these two players have never played before, I'm just going to be going with the matchup and say that Reru ends up winning it. And then you're going to have Zomba versus Reru, and I would expect Zomba to win this one. Luigi Rob is not fun for Luigi at all. Yes, the character is combo food, but in every other aspect of the game, Rob is just winning. Neutral is really tough. The offstage gameplay is an absolute nightmare. Don't even get me started about that disadvantage. And Zomba has beaten Luigi in the past, so I'm going to say that Zomba wins that one. And then you're going to have Tama P versus Zomba. And I'm not going to lie, this is a terrible bracket for Zomba, at least to get into the top 8 specifically, because he either has Mia, Meister, or Tamapi, or Tsubaki, but those 3 players are the most likely, and those matchups are just god-awful for Rob. Now, Zomba, he's good at the Bayonetta matchup, he's good at the Game Watch matchup, but they're just really difficult to overcome, and I think Tamapi is going to get into the top 8 through the winner's side. On the other side of the top 64, our first top seed is going to be Spargo, and his first opponent is going to be up versus level 1, and I'm not going to lie to y'all, I have no idea how Toon Link does versus any of Spargo's characters. If I had to guess, it feels like Aegis is not a fun time. Same thing with Corrin, and even if the matchup was bad, I would still expect Spargo to win it because, you know, he's Spargo, but level 1 is definitely a player that should not be underestimated. He is extremely talented at this game. I would still peg him as the best Toon Link player in the entire world, but Spargo's in contention for the best player in the entire world, period, so he should win that one. Then you're going to have Snow versus Neo, and I'm going to be going with Neo to win this one. Snow has been so impressive to me recently, but Neo's also been looking exceptional, in contention for at least a top 20 spot in the world right now, and I do think that Corrin does really well into Mario. The character just has a hard time versus big disjoints, and Mario down air versus Corrin up air, I don't know how that character is supposed to get down, so I'm going to be going with Neo there. Then you're going to have Spargo versus Neo, and I'm going to be favoring Spargo, considering that he's beaten Shattuck in their recent encounters, and Shattuck is definitely better than Neo, and Spargo has also been grinding the Corrin himself, so he's going to be very ready for that character. He's going to know what to do. Now, it's not 1000%. Neo is still exceptional, and maybe that different style of Corrin throws Spargo off guard, but I'm going to be giving Spargo the benefit of the doubt. I should add that Snow and Neo have played once before, and it did go into Snow's favor in a 3-0 fashion. It was fairly recent, so a lot more credit towards Snow in this matchup, even though I do think that it's one that Neo should be winning. But regardless of what happens here, Spargo should definitely beat both players. I don't know how Snow's supposed to get past that Cloud back air, but I wanted to point it out. Next up is going to be Yaura versus Masa, and I do think that Masa is going to make the upset here. They've never played before, but Yaura has played once versus Matsunabe. He ends up losing that set, and Falco just does really well into Samus. That is definitely a struggle matchup for the character. Now, with that in mind, Yaura's form has been incredible recently. He is in contention for a top 10 spot currently, but Masa, if he went to more events, could probably also be in contention for that spot because this guy is unreal, and I think he's going to make the upset. They're going to have T versus Akka, and I also think that Akka is going to make the upset here. We haven't seen a ton from T, and his form has been kind of all over the place. He's looked really good at certain events, really mid at other events, but Hero does pretty well into Pac-Man, and Hero Kazuya isn't as good for Hero in my opinion, but it is still a matchup where you definitely can win it, and Akka is so good at this game. I still think that he is the best Hero player in the entire world at using the buffs, and versus Kazuya specifically, I think that is going to be really important, but if his menu game is on point, and if he's able to kind of just destroy Hydrant immediately, which he definitely can do with Hero, I think he's going to be able to take that upset over T. Then you're going to have Akka versus Masa, and I would definitely expect Masa to take this one. Falco Hero is just not a lot of fun for you. You have that frame 1 reflector from Falco, so the second hero wants to do anything funny, nope, you get reflected and you die at 0. And in the winner semifinals, you're going to have Spargo versus Masa, and I just think Spargo is going to win this one. Masa has a very real chance, of course, but Spargo, an amazing player. He's been so good recently, and I don't know if it's going to be the Cloud, the Aegis, or the Corrin. It's kind of tough to predict who Spargo plays, but with all 3 sword characters, I think he comes out on top. And really quickly, before we do move on to the next part of the bracket, I want to point out the fact that Yara is going to be projected into Spargo, even though I do think Masa is going to take the upset. Yara does beat Spargo in their only encounter the last time Spargo was in Japan, so if he makes here, there's a very real chance that Spargo could drop down to the loser side, but hopefully for NA, he doesn't make it there. I also wanted to point out that Aka does have a pretty bad record versus T historically, 3-1 in T's favor, but also they haven't played in 3 years, so it doesn't really matter to be honest, but I wanted to point it out. Next up is going to be Hurt versus Yamanakshin, and I would definitely expect Hurt to take this set. He is very good versus Steve, and Snake also does pretty well into Steve. I would say that matchup is at least even, maybe even slightly in Snake's favor, and he's taken a set off a color before. He should be able to deal with the Yamanakshin. Then you're going to have Zachary versus Toraguri, and this is a really interesting one for me, because they've only played once before. It was at a local event, but it did go into Zachary's favor, but I'm going to be going with Toraguri because this guy has been excellent. And Zachary is just a huge wildcard coming into the event. Zachary could get last place and he could also win the entire thing. And my reaction would be the exact same of, oh yeah, that makes sense. He's just such a high variance player that I don't know how he's going to do. And Toraguri is very consistent even though he's on Banjo-Kazooie. So I'm going to go with him to make the upset. Then you're going to have Hurt versus Toraguri. And they've played twice before, I believe. Both of them went into Hurt's favor, but both those sets were extremely close. They played once at Delta 5 and then once more recently at Battle of BC. And that Battle of BC set was very good, almost a reverse 3-0 in Toraguri's favor, but Hurt managed to close it out, and I think he's going to do the same thing this time around. Next up is going to be Shutone versus Fui, and I do think that Shutone is going to win this one. Pyramithor just does extremely well into Yoshi, but I want to give Fui his flowers because this player is exceptional. He's one of the most underrated players in Japan, and that's probably because there's so many good Yoshis. Like, you got Yoshidora, you got Ron, those guys are killing it, but Fui has also had some exceptional results. He definitely could go on a run at this event, but if it happens, it's probably going to be on the loser side because I do think Shutone is going to take him out. Then you're going to have MK Leo versus Umeki, and this one is really tough for me because Mudace has been doing pretty well into Leo recently, and Umeki and MK Leo haven't played since MK Leo was in Japan all those years ago, and it did go into Umeki's favor, so all the numbers are saying that Umeki should win this one, but I don't really care about the numbers this time around. I am going with MK Leo for NA. He's going to be able to get the dub, and then he's going to run it to Shutone, and the numbers, I can't argue against them on this one. Shutone has not dropped a game to MK Leo. Now, to be fair, they haven't played in quite some time, and their first two sets were like ages ago. Their only recent set was at the Scuffed Invitational, but it was a 3-0 in Shutone's favor, and I think that trend is hopefully not going to keep up in the 3-0 fashion, but it's going to be in Shutone's favor, and then you're going to have Hurt versus Shutone. This is another situation where on paper you would favor Shutone, but in practice, Hurt is just exceptional. That's the strongest thing about this player is all of these terrible matchups, he's just constantly overcoming them. And Aegis isn't necessarily a terrible matchup for Snake, but I do think it is a matchup where he struggles slightly, but Hurt time and time again has shown that he can overcome it, and I can't see why he doesn't do it here. Heading for Pluck, I lied to you. MK Leo and Umeki have played since the Japan Major, and you do have MK Leo winning both those sets now. They're 4 years ago. This data doesn't matter, but I wanted to point out that I lied to you. Now, you know the drill at this point. We don't do the losers bracket just because most of these matchups are not going to happen, so I've taken the players that are most likely to top 8, and I've given them their odds. You have the confidence here with Akola, Tamapi, Spargo, and Hurt. These are the people I picked to top 8 to the winner side. Then you have somewhat confident with Shutone, MK Leo, Zamba, and Mia, and those are the people that I picked to top 8 through the loser side of the bracket. And specifically, I think Shutone is going to get top 8 right here, and I would favor him versus T and Snow, which are the players that are most likely to make it to him. But honestly, a lot of these players could make it to Shutone, but I would just favor him versus the field at this point. Then you're going to have MK Leo. I think he's going to top 8 through this part of the bracket, and I know what you're saying, this isn't Cope. The reason that I chose MK Leo is because there's no matchups here where I think are unwinnable for him, or even matchups where I think the other opponent is super favored versus him. The only one that I could think of is Yara, and we'll get to that in just a second. That's why he is in his own tier, but I think MK Leo has a lot of 50-50s here. There's no matchups that he can't win, and because of that, I think he's the most likely to get top 8 through this part of the bracket. Then I think your top 8 through this part of the bracket is going to be Zomba. His most likely opponents are going to be Osimo or Gluttony, and I would favor him both those matchups. Osimo is a little bit scary just considering that he has beaten Zomba in the past, but you have Zomba winning their most recent encounter. You haven't beaten Gluttony at Genesis, so he should be able to get into the top 8. And then finally, you're going to have Mia. He's going to get top 8 through this part of the bracket right here, because remember, this is Meister, but actually this is Mia because Tamapi beats Mia at this point, and I just would be really shocked if this guy did not get into the top 8. He should beat Raru. It's Luigi versus Game Watch. He should beat Ken, even though Sonic doesn't do terrible into Game Watch. Just historically, that is a super dominant record for him. And the other players, you have T, Osimo, Gluttony, Meister, Gak, Snow, Zachary, Neo, Toriguri, Raru, and Masa. they're just all so good at this game. I could easily see every single one of them making it into the top 8. And you'll notice that I don't have a tier right here for a player with like, maybe they could do it, because I don't think we're going to see a run like this at this tournament. It is just so insanely top heavy that if it's not one of these 20 players, like if anyone else gets in the top 8 that isn't one of these 20 players, I would be very, very shocked. And I kind of skipped over it, but I want to talk about Yara. Now, initially I had Yara getting into the top 8 over MKLeo, but then I remembered that Masa would be the player that he has to beat into the top 8 in order to qualify, and I think Masa is favored versus Yara, so that is the reason why I didn't do it, but I wanted to put him in his own tier because I think he is more likely to get top 8 than any of these other players. Yara is incredible. He has been leagues above everyone else right now, and he's just such a good player, but the bracket for him, Masa is just a tough draw, and that's why. Editing for block, I forgot to add Ken to also very real chance tier, but he is absolutely in there. Really quickly before we get into the top 8, I wanted to give a shout out to Glutony. Even though I think this bracket is really bad for him and I don't foresee him getting into the top 8, he looked so much better at Game is Game, and I think he deserves the recognition. And we have arrived at the top 8, and as you probably noticed, we've got this lovely new top 8 graphic by Memorization. Their link will be down below. Please, please, please check them out because this is super cool. And while you're down there, be sure to sub. But let's get into this top 8. Our first matchup is going to be Akola versus Tama P. And I think that Tama P is going to take this one. He's going to be the first player in 2024 to beat Akola at an event that counts. And it should be noted, these guys have only played 3 times before, all within the same event. But Tama P ends up winning 2 of those 3 sets. I think Bayonetta does really well into Steven. By that, I mean the matchup is at least even, maybe even slightly in Bale's favor. She's just able to dance around this character so expertly, kind of in the same aspect of Sonic, though not as strong. And I think the main challenge for Tama P in this bracket is, you know, to get to this point in the bracket. I mean, obviously, but if he's able to overcome those matches from earlier on, which I definitely think that he can, he's got a really solid chance to get into this winners finals over Akola. I have a lot of faith in this player, if you couldn't tell, and I think he's going to make the upset. Then you're going to have Spargo versus Hurt, and they've only played twice before at Battle of BC, and Hurt ends up winning both of those sets. And I think he's going to win it again, because the reason that Hurt won those sets is because he was consistently outplaying Spargo, which is not something that I can say, like, ever. I can't think of a time in recent history where Spargo just did not look like the better player, but Hurt was just beating him in every single aspect of the game. It feels like he was going for so many reads that were hitting, and I think Spargo is going to make a lot of adjustments here. I think Cloud and Aegis do pretty well into Snake, but until I see those adjustments, I have to go with Hurt here. Next up is going to be Mia versus Zomba, and this is another just really bad matchup for Zomba. I honestly think this bracket is pretty trash for him, all things considered, but if he is able to get top 8 here, he might have an extra boost, because I think not every single time Zomba has gone to a Japanese major, but pretty much every single time, he's gotten 9th place. He just has not been able to get into that top 8. Maybe he finally gets in the top 8 here, and he's just got a bunch of momentum behind him. That is a very real chance of a possibility, but I'm still going to go with Mia because it's Game & Watch Rob, and that matchup is really, really bad. And then you're going to have MK Leo Shutone, and I'm again going to be going with Shutone here. Leo has not taken a game. Until he takes a game, you literally just have to bet on Shutone. Next up is going to be Spargo versus Mia, and I'm going to be going with Spargo here. This is just another example of, I think Mia is good enough to win it. I think he's been putting in the time, but until I see it, I have to go with Spargo. Not only on paper is the matchup in his favor, but in practice, Spargo has been extremely dominant. He has so much experience versus Game & Watch, and it very clearly is paying off versus Mia, and it's not like the Steve is a great choice either. Now, we could see the Mii Sword Fighter come out. Do I think Spargo's going to lose to Mii Sword Fighter? No. But it could come out, and then you're going to have Akola versus Shutone, and I would expect Akola to take this one. Shutone has beaten Akola in the past, but in the recent sets, it has all been Akola coming out on top. He's just been super, super good, so I'm going to go with him. And we've got our top 4, Tama P versus Hurt in the winner's side, and Spargo versus Akola in the loser side. Starting off with Hurt versus Tama P, and matchup-wise, you would definitely favor Snake here. Now, it's not as bad as the Bayonetta players make it out to be. In the neutral, I do think that Bayonetta is favored, but in every other aspect of the game, it just gets extremely difficult for the character. Normally, Bayonetta has this super oppressive advantage state and combo game. Versus Snake, that's not as much of the case because Grenade and Cypher just really, really hard tools for her to deal with. You don't have the same pressure that you normally get from side B and up B, and you can be precise around Grenade in your combo game, but it's really difficult to get those super early kills versus Snake, where Snake has no problem killing Bale. So it's definitely a matchup that Snake wins, and because of that, I would expect her to win it. And also, Hurt's form has just been like perfect recently, so I'm going to say he gets to the Grand Finals winner's side. Then you're going to have Spargo versus Akola, and it's the exact same thing I said earlier on for Spargo Mia. Until I see Akola win the set, you just have to bet with Spargo here. But I do want to say, My theory of why Akola hasn't been going to events is because he has been, well, number one, he's probably just doing school, but number two, he has been grinding the ages. He wants to make sure that character is in top form for when he fights Spargo, because it looked pretty good in their last set, and that was quite some time ago. I think the Aegis is going to be a serious threat for Spargo at this point, but I've got to see it to believe it. Though, have faith in Akola. I think the set is going to be extremely close. In the losers finals, you're going to have Tama P versus Spargo, and this is where Tama P's grand run finally comes to an end. We've only seen Spargo play versus Lima one time offline, and it did go into Spargo's favor game 5. Surprisingly, though, it was Cloud versus Bale. I would have thought that Aegis would be a better choice. I mean, Aegis is a better choice in the Bayonetta, but at the end of the day, it is player preference which matters the most, and Spargo clearly more comfortable with the Cloud in that matchup, and there aren't a lot of Cloud players in Japan. I believe the best one is still Yoshi, but there definitely could be a Cloud player that popped up that I've just completely missed, so let me know if I'm wrong about that. But basically what I'm saying is Tama P is playing in a matchup where he doesn't have a ton of experience against a world-class player versus the other world-class players. At least Bayonetta did well into that matchup, and he has reps in that matchup where he's had success. Spargo, there's a lot more variance here. He's such a good player, and I think he's going to be able to overcome Tama P. And in the grand finals, you're going to have Hurt versus Spargo, a run back of the winner semis, and it's the exact same situation. I think that Hurt is going to win the event. Now, I think Spargo has a pretty real chance to reset the bracket, especially if he loses right here, just considering he can learn from what he did wrong. But at Battle of BC, he also lost to Hurt in the winner side, and he wasn't able to adapt in time. So I think Hurt is going to be able to be your winner of Delta 8, the first of the 2 P-tiers that are taking place this weekend. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the sport. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye!